We heard from Commanders head coach Ron Rivera on Monday, and he did not want to talk about who the starting quarterback will be against the Dallas Cowboys. But we promised you on our post-game live episode that we would tell you who the starting quarterback should be. Chris Russell says the answer is easy. Let's find out on Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the WUSA 9 Plus app on your Roku or your Amazon Fire Stick. And as always, we thank you for making us your first listen or your first view every single day. I'm David Harrison. My co-host sitting next to me, speaking next to me, is Chris the Rooster Russell. Both of us are credentialed members of the media covering your Washington Commanders. Chris is doing it for Team 980, where he and Pete Medhurst are live every Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, or whenever you want on the Odyssey app. I am over at Commander Country, where I am writing about your Commanders for Sports Illustrated's FanNation, including, Chris, the latest piece that I have up there, which is based off of your segment, your interview with Jay Gruden on Russell and Medhurst, where he says a lot of good things. Definitely an interview worth listening to from start to finish. But what I pulled from there, thanks to a tweet that you sent out, was that Jay Gruden says that Derek Carr should absolutely be target number one for the Commanders this offseason. So Jay Gruden's talking quarterbacks. You and I are going to talk quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. What did Ron Rivera talk about?
Well, before we get to what Ron Rivera said to the media, we, of course, thank you guys for making us your first listen and view of the day. And today's episode as of Locked On Commanders, as we, of course, officially begin the morning process, is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick between 2 and 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. All right, David, so you mentioned Ron Rivera speaking yet again on Monday. Again, traditional thing that he has to do. For anybody that's criticizing him for talking too much or explaining too much, you got to kind of understand how this works, right? So he was, of course, asked about who the starting quarterback will be for this Sunday's game against the Dallas Cowboys. And shockingly, he said, well, nobody just yet, that he hasn't made that decision, or at least that he's not going to release that decision. And before we get into a couple of the other big picture items, David, I teased on the post-game episode on Sunday night into Monday that I thought it should be one person. You just kind of alluded to that at the top before our intro.
Yeah.
To me, I don't know if you're on the same page exactly as me, but there's one guy that has to start, and that's Sam Howell. You can't start Carson Wentz in this game. You can't start Taylor Heinicke. You have to move on from both. That's a bigger picture discussion. But to me, there's one guy that you need to find out something about that you don't know, and that's Sam Howell.
Yeah, and I know you're not alone on that. And I want to preface this by saying that I am a Sam Howell guy. Like, I like Sam Howell. I liked him in the draft. I didn't necessarily like him, like the one of the top quarterbacks coming off the board type of thing. I thought, day 2 would be more kind of his sweet spot. I think a lot of people expected that. And when he was still there day 3, like, that just blew everybody's mind, I think. Here's my problem with the Sam Howell conundrum, right? Or decision. I understand the concept, right? Like, you're playing for the future. You're looking towards 2023. So let's see what we get from, or what we have from Sam Howell. But I would say this: you don't know what you have from Sam Howell against the Dallas Cowboys. Like, good, bad, or indifferent. If he goes out there and blows the Dallas Cowboys up, you don't know that he's going to be a franchise quarterback. Mm-hmm. If he goes out there and lays an egg, you don't know that he's going to be a draft dud. And if he goes out there and plays average, you don't know that he's going to be average for his entire career. So in reality, when you walk out of the stadium after the Dallas Cowboys game and Sam Howell played, like, don't get me wrong, live bullets are valuable. You know what I mean? So the experience is valuable, and it absolutely is. My question is risk reward. How much are you really taking away from that if you're the Washington Commanders as far as what Sam Howell brings. Like Sam Howell, like they've been learning about him all season long, his work ethic, his preparation, his study habits, his ability to retain information, all of that stuff. They have been in deep with all of that stuff. I don't want to start Sam Howell this weekend because I don't want him to get hurt. You know what I mean? Like, so like when I say I don't want to start Sam Howell, it's not that I don't want to start Sam Howell. It's that I don't want Sam Howell to have to go out there and run around for his life against the Dallas Cowboys defense that quite honestly is going to come out with their hair on fire trying to win a division. I anticipate that the Cowboys and Eagles are going to play at the same time.
Yeah.
If I'm the NFL, that's what I would do, which means the Cowboys are coming out there looking to win a division. And so if I put Sam Howell out there, Micah Parsons is going to come out there looking to eat his soul. You know what I mean? And for me personally, if he does well, that's fantastic. But if he gets injured, or worse, if he gets completely demolished and now our confidence in this guy is completely tanked, you're going to hear all summer, all winter, and early spring long, trade up for Bryce Young, trade up for CJ Stroud. And that's going to kill. You have a rookie quarterback that you're going to kill him in the court of public opinion, a lot of the media outlets and some of the fan base for one game. And it's a game that you really can't gain anything from. So to me, it's you're putting too much on the line. If you like Sam Howell, which everything that we heard from inside the organization is that they loved Sam Howell coming into the draft. And the only reason they didn't draft him earlier was basically to protect Carson's ego. If that's true, you gain nothing of substance, of significant substance by putting him out there. Like, is Sam Howell going to be in the doghouse after this game if he does bad? No. Is he going to be the next franchise starter if he does well? No. You can't do that. You have to at least bring in competition. So I don't understand. I don't see the value in it that everybody else sees. I think you either go with Taylor because he's a free agent. So if he gets hurt, and I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to have no heart here, but if he gets hurt, you're not on the hook for anything anyway. Or you go with Jake Fromm. Personally, I go with Taylor. But the risk, I guess I would call it a risk, but what are the aesthetics going to be on that, Chris? This is what you should have done a week ago. And
so just to
Ron's
clarify,
going to get brutalized for that.
You would go Taylor 1, Jake Fromm 2?
Yeah. Maybe you put Sam Howell in there, and look, if your offensive line is standing up to the Cowboys or it's a blowout late, hopefully it's a blowout win for the internal aspect of it. I know the draft pick stuff, obviously the fans want different, but if it's like a blowout and, there's not a whole lot of risk of like, there's an understanding like, hey, Coach McCarthy, we're going to put Sam out here. You're not going to kill him. Like, you're going to tell Micah Parsons, take it easy. Game's over. Let's not ruin this guy's career and let's get him some live reps. I wouldn't mind that, having Sam as a backup situation, but I don't know, man. Like I said, to me, the potential reward of putting Sam out there doesn't outweigh the risks. But I do agree with you that I think Sam Howell is going to start this game. And look, from a personal standpoint, like I'm going to be excited for him. I'm going to be pumped for him to get his first start. I'm going to be pumped for him to lead that team out there. It's in FedEx, all that stuff. Like, I'm going to be happy for him. I just, from an organizational leadership standpoint, I don't think it's worth the risk.
All right. There's a split opinion, obviously, that we have, and yet we both feel like it will be Sam Howell ultimately. Right. I guess the one thing that I would counter everything that you said, and I totally get what you're saying and understand it, maybe it reduces the level of desperation if he goes out there and plays well against a really good, aggressive defense in a big spot for them, in a spot that you claim, as Ron did on Monday, that you are really like Ron. And this leads us into the second bullet point of what I took away from Ron on Monday, which is, and no surprise here, Ron wants to win this game against the Cowboys, even though it means absolutely nothing. And David, here's the worst part. It actually hurts the Commanders if they do win. Yeah. It hurts the Commanders if they win. For a second year in a row, we are in this position where they are going to play, balls to the wall and try and win a game that actually hurts them to win.
Yeah, I mean, the whole dynamic, I hate this part of the season, right? Because the whole dynamic between going out playing to win and going out protecting draft status is a discussion that I hate having, but unfortunately it does have to be had. But before we do that conversation, Chris, we're going to have a separate conversation thanks to our friends over at Prize Picks. Here's the way the Prize Picks works. You pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections and you pick what they do correctly, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. And that's it. It's just you versus the projections. You're not playing me. You're not playing Chris. You're not playing the guy down the road that has all the fantasy magazines. It's just the projections. You pick whether they're going to score more or less than those. If they do, you win. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport you watch. So even though the NFL season is kind of starting to wind down, they will have NBA. They do have NBA. Major League Baseball, when that comes back, hockey is in full swing. PGA is a thing that happens that I don't know when that happens, but it's going to happen at some point in time. And you can make all your entries in 60 seconds or less. It's super easy, super fun. And again, you can win up to 10 times your entry on any entry. Safe and fast withdrawals are offered as well. Currently operational in 30 states and Canada, in over 30 states rather, in Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users, you can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On, all caps, all one word, at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Continue our conversation here on Locked On Commanders podcast. Do you want to win the game or do you want to win the draft position? We're going to talk about that here on Locked On Commanders. We thank you for joining us for that conversation, making us your first listen every day. Make sure you're also joining the conversation at Locked On Sports today. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around sports in less than 20 minutes. Analysis, opinions from everybody and everywhere in the Locked On network. Locked On Sports today, available on YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Chris, do you want the win? Well, so here's the thing. Ron Rivera says they're going to win. They're going to play to win. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Please don't. Please don't win. Please try hard. Please don't embarrass yourself. Yeah. Don't get Hershey squirts in your underwear. And please start Sam Howell. But please don't win. Because again, this whole notion that you have to win every game that you play, well, yes, true. But let me rewind. Last year, when they went into MetLife Stadium and beat the Giants, that cost them the 8th spot in the draft. They finished with the 11th spot in the draft. Now, that doesn't seem like a whole lot, David. If you just, 8th to 11th, well, what's the big deal, Chris? It's just a couple of spots. Again, it's not only where you pick, it's also the leverage that you then have in terms of making a potential trade up for one of the top quarterbacks, a CJ Stroud. And look at what he did for Ohio State, using his legs and arm, obviously, with Marvin Harrison on Saturday night, despite the crushing loss. You know that, obviously, as an Ohio State guy.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Sorry. I was trying to bring up the positive, but you get my point. Like,
Right.
It's easier to trade up from the 8th spot, for argument's sake, or the 10th spot than it is the 11th spot or the 15th spot. Again, you can try hard to win and not win, and I guess that's the best case scenario as long as you avoid major injury. But what happens if you go out trying to win a meaningless game and you do win? Yeah, maybe you derail Dallas from winning the NFC East, and hey, we get to pump our chest, beat Dallas week and all this nonsense. And, my pal Sonny Jurgensen gets his number retired and the Cowboy fans, 45,000 of them go home unhappy. But guess what, guys? The Cowboys are going to the playoffs. You're not ruining anything. Maybe you're taking away a home field game from them. You're not ruining anything. And you're winning, and it hurts you ultimately instead of helping you. There is absolutely nothing to be gained by winning this game. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, January 8th, it feels good, right? But January 15th, nobody cares anymore. Like, because Dallas can be getting ready. We're playing a wild card game. And you're going to be sitting at home. And at the end of February, at the scouting combine, it's going to hurt. And in April, it's going to hurt, right? I mean, you look at it, the Washington Commanders, they have the 8th pick. The Atlanta Falcons, obviously they don't have the 8th pick. Drake London is the first wide receiver off the board. Now, look, I love Jahan Dotson, and I think that they got a great player, and I think they got a great deal. So I would almost say not so much you could draft another guy. Now, do the Commanders draft Drake London or maybe Garrett Wilson if they're in the 8th pick? I mean, maybe. That's just facts. But I'm thinking from alternate universe, you still get Jahan Dotson. But guess what? If you trade back from 8th to somewhere else to get Jahan Dotson, maybe you trade from 8th to 11th and you grab yourself some more draft capital that is higher draft capital, actually, and you still get Jahan. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's from an outside point of view, 100%. You don't want to win this game. Which honestly, to me, kind of clouds the whole Sam Howell should start conversation even more. But I don't want to rehash that. And honestly, to me, it kind of pushes you towards Jake Fromm. Put Jake Fromm out there. Let's see if maybe we think he'd be a backup guy, good locker room guy, good meeting room guy. Let's see if we want to keep him on the roster next year. We know what Taylor is. We know what Carson is. Jake Fromm starts. Sam Howell backs him up. We tell Jake Fromm, bro, go out there like it's a Sugar Bowl. Do your thing. Do the best you can for this team. Because guess what? He's going to do that anyway. If you tell Jake Fromm, Jake, we're taking a dive against the Dallas Cowboys, that's what Jake Fromm is going to do. He is going to go out there and throw darts. Like you can't tell a football player not to win a game. These guys take way too much punishment and they work way too hard for way too much permanent physical damage to go out there and tank a game. It's not going to happen. So if you want to lose this game, you put in Jake Fromm, you put in Jarrett Patterson, you put in Dax Milne as your wide receiver 1. You bring Mark and Michelle, you activate him for the first time. I don't know, Amari Rodgers gets to start, although he does pretty good anyway, et cetera. You get the point, right? So, but let's look at this. Right now, the Washington Commanders are 14th in the NFL draft. If the NFL draft was today, the Washington Commanders are 14th at 7-8-1. And this is where we go back to that tie. We talked about it then. That tie could either be a loss or a win, depending on what happens in the season. Right now, it's a win. And that's a bad thing because you're behind all these 7-9 teams because you're 7-8-1. So, you know what I mean? So you're 14th instead of, I don't know, maybe 10th, depending on tiebreakers, right? Where the New Orleans Saints are. So if the Saints win, Titans win, Browns win, well, Texans win, Jets win, and Commanders lose, they move up to number 10. That's the best they could do. The Commanders, the best they could do right now is 10th. Because Carolina, Vegas, Atlanta all have 6 wins, but they also have 10 losses. So again, that tie hurts you because even if those teams win and get 7 wins and you lose and get your 9th loss, they saw more losses than you. You're behind all those teams. The best the Commanders can do is 10th overall. They have to lose in order for that to happen, and all these other teams have to win. And there's tiebreakers in there that I'm not even sure they can get to number 10, to be quite honest with you. But if they don't, then they're sitting at 14.
If you win, David, on Sunday,
if you win, then you
take
could
away
be
a whole playoff game from the Cowboys. But what does that get you? And in all likelihood,
you'd be as deep as 19. I want to say 18. Yeah. You could be as deep as 18.
Right. And then it's so much harder to move up the board for not only a quarterback, but anybody that you want. I mean, instead of being in a position of leverage, sort of like you were last year to trade down and still get a Dotson once London was gone. And remember, London was number 1 on their board. Again, maybe this is too early for this, but it's mental gymnastics.
It's draft season, baby.
It's draft gymnastics. And I look, I had no problem with this team going for the playoffs. They failed miserably.
Right.
Now you have to try and make your future better, period.
It's over. Yeah. So move again. So take it for the future. And I said it again, like, I understand like the Sam Howell. I want to see Sam Howell play a game as much as the next guy.
Yeah.
But I just don't know that putting him out there against Dallas really serves anything for your future other than putting it potentially at risk. And again, not to disrespect Jake Fromm, he's a nice guy too. I talk to him in the locker room all the time as well. He's got a great podcast, Punt and Pass podcast with Drew Butler. Go check it out. It's really great stuff. But let's be honest, like Jake's not, as of right now, like he's not really in the running to be the future of this franchise. Right. And I think that no matter what, if you're wanting to trade up for a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young, like Sam Howell, like unless he goes out there and drops 500 and 4 touchdowns on the Dallas Cowboys, isn't going to change that. And I don't think that's going to happen. But if Sam Howell goes out there and does average or loses, and now you end up with a higher draft pick, are you going to draft a quarterback first round? I don't really think you are. And I think honestly, a Derek Carr, like Jay was talking about, is probably the most likely type of avenue. Maybe like a Ryan Tannehill, which I wouldn't be incredibly excited about, but I think is definitely on the table. There's another name on the table that I dropped on you, Chris, that we're not going to drop on this episode, but we will soon enough.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Well, this all kind of circles back on top of each other, but I just feel like if you're a Washington Commanders fan, there's 2 last things I want to say, and I'll let you finish off this segment. If you're a Washington Commanders fan and you want Sam Howell to play, but you also want your team to lose, why do you want Sam Howell to play is my question. 2, and I get it. He could do well and he can still lose. I got it. But Sam Howell's not going to go out there to lose, guys. Number 2 is, honestly, if we're right, Chris, and Dan Snyder's going to sell this team this offseason, he was not going to agree to a sale until this team was eliminated from contention anyway. And do any Washington fans want Dan Snyder's name on a Lombardi trophy? So if you don't want Dan on a Lombardi and you want the team sold earlier as soon as possible, or at least the news of an agreement announced as soon as possible. And again, and we're talking about draft positions. If you're not going to win the Lombardi, do you even want to make the playoffs?
Well, that's a tough question. That's a loaded question, right? Because we know they're not making.
There's no right answer.
Yeah, we know they're not making the playoffs. We hope that it induces him to sell and get out, and we hope it speeds up the process so that it can be finalized in late March. but we don't know if that actually is going to happen and what factors are what. That's a different conversation I think that we have to have when we have more time. But real quickly, you mentioned the Derek Carr, Jay Gruden thing. Again, Jay Gruden is, just the former head coach here and now out of the NFL, but he very closely follows it. I mean, he's an executive consultant for the Rams, but he very closely follows the league. Okay. And his brother obviously had Derek Carr. And this was, I think, part of the genesis of him advocating for Derek Carr. And here's the other thing real quickly. If Derek Carr is released by the Las Vegas Raiders, he becomes even more attractive as opposed to if you trade for him, which is same kind of scenario that an organization I think we both know faced last year and did the unthinkable. So maybe this time around, you let a certain veteran quarterback become a free agent and then you try and pounce.
Hey, maybe that would be interesting. That would be very interesting.
that would be interesting, and it would also be probably more prudent. But we will have to see. Obviously, lots of conversation coming up on that. If
well,
you want to read
to your
David's
co-host on Team 980's point, Pete Medhurst, Teresh, our buddy, the tweets went out. Teresh was like, would he trade? So Derek Carr has a no trade clause. Would he waive his no trade clause to come to Washington? And basically my answer, I'm not quoting myself, but my answer I think was it's basically, that's very intriguing. I think ownership has kind of a little bit, like the future of the franchise obviously has something to do with that. But Pete dropped in and said to play with these weapons, absolutely. I think Pete's basically said that they would, and I agree. I think if you're a quarterback, especially a veteran looking to restart, these are the weapons you want. Now the O-line is what it is right now, but these weapons are very, very attractive for any veteran quarterback.
No doubt. But again, also remember there's contract gymnastics here, salary cap gymnastics. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to have to trade for him. We'll get into all the details and all the, things about that as we go along and have more conversation, obviously, on Derek Carr. And go read David's piece again on SI.com and FanNation and Commander Country. And you can listen to the whole interview on the Odyssey app as you can each and every episode here of the Locked On Commanders podcast. All right, coming up next on the Locked On Commanders podcast, it's been 3 years since Ron Rivera was introduced as head coach and grand poobah of the Washington Commanders, then another name. How did he grade in our eyes? That's next. Our answer to that on Locked On Commanders coming up. But first, this episode of LOC is presented by BetOnline. That's right, betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. The Cowboys are favored by 6 already on the opening line against the Commanders on Sunday afternoon. Ron Rivera says the Commanders are playing to win. We've already talked about the quarterback. I have a sneaking suspicion you should probably slam some dough down on the boys. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to the college football bowl season to basketball, all the action on the ice. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find them there too. Always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information in game and out of game. Head to the website today or use your mobile device at BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, one last conversation on this episode of Locked On Commanders. Of course, make sure you come back tomorrow. Chris will be flying solo, but he's got plenty to talk about. Obviously, we can't even stay on all of our topics on this episode without having to it's going to be an off season, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. Yeah. We will be here with you 5 days a week, all throughout the off season. So we're not going anywhere. Don't go anywhere on us. Ron Rivera, the question is he going to go anywhere? And I think in order to answer that question, you have to start with an evaluation of where this team has gone. So first things, Chris, is what is your overall kind of grade analysis of Ron Rivera 3 years in? Does next week have the opportunity to change anything of where you stand right now?
All right. So 3 years into this thing, he was introduced to the media. I mean, of course, he had come to an agreement earlier, but January 2nd, 2020. So 3 years ago now, Monday. And if you look at Ron as the head coach, general manager, end all be all of football operations, I think, David, for me, as a report card grade, I can't give him any more than a C. But I would also say this. Yeah. I'm going to give him a C- because the football operation, quite honestly, while it's better in a lot of ways, the talent and the depth is better in a lot of ways. They just simply have not won enough games, and they still don't have the answer to the quarterback of the future. And now you face some other dilemmas, such as Daron Payne, Cameron Curl, and others that you have to decide whether you're going to pay Chase Young, fifth-year option, all of that stuff, Montez Sweat. So again, I would say for me, it's a C- because they just haven't won enough and they haven't solved the dilemma of QB1, as Ron likes to say. Could I give him a D? Sure. I mean, I'm not as hard on him about his coaching or in-game coaching tactics as others are. Maybe I'm being too easy on him, but I see Ron right now as no better than a C-, and again, teetering on that D+ area, because just simply, you even if you win this week and you win an 8th game, David, it means nothing. Again, as we go back, at least in my perspective, you would have then won more games than you did the first 2 years, but it means nothing because you were 7-5 and in total control of your own destiny, and you barely could squeak out an 8th win, and that 8th win would come in, again, a meaningless game. So to me, it means absolutely nothing.
So to me, I will say this, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say this. The last game actually can change things for me. And I say it like this, Chris, if you're going to hand in a term paper, you get it back and it says C-, and you walk up to your professor like, oh man, C-, I really thought I did better on this. And your professor went, oh wait, C-, my bad. No, that's a C, and hand it back to you. How would you feel?
Well, I'd feel slightly better.
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay. Like, you're not going to go celebrate, right? But you're like, oh, right. Okay. I'm glad I said something, right? That's what the last game can do for me. Because right now you're at a C-. You're at a firm C-. If they win this game, all right, I'll give you a C. You know what I mean? Like, because you have 8 wins. The 2 out of 3 seasons before Ron got here, right? We're talking about a 3-year evaluation. 2 of the 3 seasons before Ron got here, Washington had 7 wins. They had 1 3-win season in there. Ron comes in, you have back-to-back 7-win seasons. Now you're about to have another 7-win season. So I'm with you. If you have a 7-win season, you get a C-. If you get an 8-win season, all right, bro, I'll give you a C. You know what I mean? Like, okay, but you really haven't done anything as far as improving the state of this franchise, right? And we have some YouTube commenters, right? Gerard O'Leary, Wentz never should have started. Coach needs to go now too. Raymond on YouTube, totally embarrassing. Team had no heart, which is obviously an indictment on the coaching staff. And he calls out Scott Turner, specifically John Rassel. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. We need a brand new coaching staff. It's time. Front office too. It's been 3 years. And if you lose, it'll be 21 and 3 years now. It's a losing record. You just think, that record will be revoked. 21 and 28 in 3 years. It's time for him to go. So obviously there are a lot of Commanders fans. I'm sure on this episode, we're going to get even more coaching staff comments. Commanders fans are getting sick of it. And I think we've already kind of discussed this outside of the Dan Snyder situation. I think Ron's seat would be a little bit warmer than it is right now. But with a new ownership group potentially coming in, it might actually be very, very hot, because whoever this new ownership group is seeing everything from the outside. By the time they get on the inside, they may not have the patience to wait and see what happens. They may just be like, you know what, we've already made our decision before we arrived. Here's your C. Have a good day. Have a good next semester, because I don't think Ron or Scott or Jack are necessarily done unless they choose to be. But that's just kind of the situation. So yeah, I mean, and that's disappointing, right? The C is very disappointing for what this team probably could be or should be. But this is 2 years in a row now, and I wasn't here his first year, but I've been here for 2 years. This is 2 years in a row now where you walk away saying this team should have been so much better than their record, and they gave demonstration of why they should have been so much better than their record. So if the talent is available on the field, then the onus for not getting to where the potential can take you is on the person who's responsible for developing that potential. That's the coaching staff.
I think that's a good explanation. Obviously, you don't have really any time to kind of continue this debate on this particular episode, but we will, of course, throughout the week and throughout the offseason. I would just say one thing. Yeah. You would describe this staff, this regime, as mediocre. Mediocre might be a compliment. I'll leave you.
I will say one last thing as well. And this is, we were actually having, I know we're going to go over our time, but you know what? I think it's an important conversation. We were talking pre-recording about draft compensation when trading for a head coach and some of the historic numbers, right? Like John Gruden was traded from the Raiders to the Bucs for 2 first, 2 second-round draft picks. Bruce Arians was traded for a 6th-round pick, and they got a 7th round in return. Like, So we've seen coaches get kind of traded for a whole lot, and we've seen coaches get traded for very little. You brought up a hockey reference that a coach basically didn't even get traded, was just like, here, have him. Like, we don't want him anymore. I will say this, that everybody always says that the most important relationship on an NFL team is what? Head coach and quarterback. So if quarterback is the most valuable position, then the head coach is the most valuable position outside of the locker room, I would say. If you had a first-round pick, if you had a quarterback, and after 3 years, he was performing the same he did his rookie season or even worse in some situations, would you give that guy a 4th year, or would you start looking for a replacement?
I mean,
I think that's a lens that you kind of have to look at this coaching staff through.
I think the answer is pretty obvious. The solution is more clouded than the answer probably is in that case. All right, I'm going to have some more on this situation and some fallout. Plus, as David mentioned, one of the good things that came out of Sunday is already maybe causing some problems. I'll have that on the next episode. We'll be solo for the next 2 episodes, and then we'll get on back together before the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Commanders. But we want to thank you again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and view of the day. Now make your second listen and view the Locked On Sports Today podcast with our pal Peter Bukowski. Brings you the biggest stories from around the world in sports in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else. Locked On Sports Today podcast is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hop in, 301-615-3577, Locked On Washington Commanders at gmail.com, or please send us a DM via Twitter at LO Commanders. For my partner, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for SI.com's FanNation, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Med Herschel on the Team 980, and always live and free on the Odyssey app. If you're out and about, please be safe, kind to one another. Again, Happy New Year, despite the Commanders going nowhere. And thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.